We say that food is related to love, to your curiosity. And so you have to feed that, your love and your curiosity.
This is Tante Belle Cose, a podcast where we'll explore the many beautiful things that Italy has to offer. In each episode, we'll dive into unique stories that will inspire your travels. I'll share expert travel advice, answer your questions, and introduce you to the people that make Italy so special. If you're looking to discover the real Italy, let these stories guide your next adventure. I'm your host, Danielle Terry. I'm a writer, art historian, and the founder of Feast Travel, Arthur Avenue Food Tours, and Cilento Food Tours. I love Italy so much that the fact that I am Italian-American just feels like an extra blessing that life has given me. When I was a kid growing up in the New York suburbs, my grandmother was always receiving letters from her family in Italy. They were written on onion skin paper and stuffed into airmail envelopes that were equally thin. And each letter was precious to her. She saved them all in a large box that she kept in the room where she watched television and would spend hours crocheting these enormous tablecloths. I would always look at them and try to read them, though they were, of course, in Italian and back then, indecipherable to me. And sometimes there were also photos with someone's name written on the back. These were people who were my blood relatives, but they lived in a place that was very expensive to call and where it took at least a month to receive a letter. This was back in the 80s and the 90s, when you bought airline tickets on the phone and they arrived in the mail like an invitation to a royal wedding. We also had relatives who visited. My grandmother's brother was posted at the Italian consulate in New York for a year, and then her sister spent the summer with us. Zia Carmelina lived in Rome, but she had grown up in the rural town of Capaccio with my grandmother, and that's all they seemed to talk about. They spent most of their time together that summer working in the garden, and then they would sit on the deck and shell beans and crush tomatoes and talk and talk and talk. That would be the last Italian summer of my life before I made my first trip to Italy during college. And as my grandmother's memory declined, so did the letters. When she passed away in 2005, I wanted to take those letters, but they were gone. My grandmother had been quietly getting rid of clothes and personal belongings, including those letters, for years without anybody knowing. Today I want to introduce you to Michele Iorio, who grew up in Italy fascinated by his relatives who had emigrated to New York. Michele is a leader in a movement called Olio Tourism, which seeks to merge the worlds of agriculture and tourism for a deeper, more meaningful touristic experience. And I want to tell you how love, curiosity, and 20 olive trees led him to reunite with his relatives in America and to start his own olive oil company.
I'm Michele Iorio. I'm from Castelcivita. It's an old town on the Alburni mountain, which is a remote area, very small, very clean and safe area in the Cilento National Park.
Have you lived there your whole life?
Well, yes, I'm born there. And I moved out when I was 20 for studying.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent some year in England, in Spain, and then I decided to come back because I want to share the rest of my life with my family and in my territory. I studied international relations because I've always been fascinated by what's happening abroad, what's happening very far from where I live.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I decided to travel around. And one of my dreams was going to America, going to the United States, and to find the descendants of my family, because my ancestors emigrated 1 century ago. And then we lost contact, so that's why I decided to learn English.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. I didn't realize it was for that reason. Did they have contact with them at all?
Yes, we always talked about the family in the United States. I grew up observing the photos, pictures of my ancestors, and some pictures had some sentences in the back in English, so I was always fascinated by this. I was always asking, who wrote in English, but no. Then after the old generation passed away, they lost contact. So my generation had no contact with the descendants in the United States.
So exactly like my story, except I was on the other side in the United States. And my grandmother was here from Capaccio. We would always receive all of these photos in envelopes, but there was writing on the back in Italian.
Wow.
And I would always look at them. And we did have relatives that would come and they would speak in Italian. And I didn't understand. When my grandmother passed away, the contact ended until I was able to find Arianna again. So the same story in reverse.
My name is Michele Iorio with a Y. Michele spells it with an I. We have a fight who's the correct way, but I know he's correct, but don't tell him. My grandfather was born in Castelcido, emigrated when he was 16, worked in the coal mines of Pennsylvania, came to New York, bought a house, grabbed my grandmother by the hair, and we were the American Iorios. And I was always fascinated by where he came from. And I regret to this day not asking him more questions. But I was amazed that somebody could leave their home country at 16 and never return.
At the turn of the 20th century, millions of Italians left their home country because of the brutal economic conditions of that time period. These were people who had lived often in isolated villages where they knew everybody, and their lives were entirely dependent on two things: agriculture and their families. So the mass migration to the United States, Argentina, Brazil was a monumental rift. People didn't leave because they wanted to. They had to. And so many people who had only ever breathed fresh country air were now living in congested cities and working in factories. And while many returned to Italy after having made their fortunes abroad, plenty never did. Either there was not enough time or money, or maybe it was just too painful.
He never went back to it. My grandmother did. My parents did. He never did. Anyway, so one day when I was old and gray, I decided, let me go find Castelcido. I'm a runner. I run half marathons. So I found a half marathon that was nearby, Agropoli, not far, and I just ventured into the city, into the Paese, with my girlfriend at the time. And we drove into the plaza. I don't know where to park. It's on the side of a mountain, absolutely gorgeous. When you drive enough, you see it stuck in the mountain. Anyway, so I drive in the little plaza, stick the car in the one space that I found. I saw some old men sitting on the corner. I figured I'd try my best. I started walking over to them. Dante, the policeman, told me to move my car. I moved it literally 50 feet from one spot to another spot. Anyway, I did my best to talk to Dante, explained to him that I was looking for my grandfather's family. Took me to the police station. We go down the basement. He asked, we communicated halfway hands, halfway talking. When my grandfather was born, I had no idea when my grandfather was born. I said 1896. He takes down this big book. Beautiful, beautiful, not penmanship, calligraphy. Looking for the name, couldn't find it. Takes down 1897. I said, Dante, we're going to be here all day. I don't know exactly the year. He finds it in 1898. Finds my grandpa. He says, I know this family.
Yes, it was in 2012, and it was just one century after an ancestor that his name was Michele Iorio, just my name. He left Italy. So, and one of his nephew, and his name was the same name, Mikel Eorio, came to Italy just for a trip. He found a race, an half marathon in Agropoli, which is not too far. It is just 40 kilometers far from Castelcivita. And then he found on Google Map that Castelcivita was very close. So he decided, let's go there and see my grandfather's village. So he went there without birth certificate, just with the date of birth, went to the city hall, but the cop found in the records his birth certificate and then said, wait, I'm going to take you to your family now. Well, he was surprised. And when he knocked on my door, I met him and they said, I'm Mikel Eorio. And then I said, I'm Mikel Eorio too.
And you were home. He knocked on the door. You happened to be home.
That was unbelievable. The cop phoned me because in such a small village.
Right.
And everyone knows everyone. And so he phoned me and he told me that he had some relative from the United States coming.
Took me in the police car to meet my family, called ahead of time that he was coming. When we arrived, I said, I tried. I am Michele Iorio, my grandfather, and I'm going on and on. All of a sudden, Michele goes, I speak English. I wanted to choke him. This was in 2012, and that's how it started. I went back in 2014, 2016, and then the last time was this is 24, 2022. It's when I stayed for 10 weeks.
So tell me about the 20 olive tree.
20 olive trees. Michele tells me, I never knew, that when my grandfather was here, when he worked, he would send money back to the family every week. And with that, they purchased 20 olive trees. And with that, it grew into the several hundred trees that they have now. And at the time, Michele tells me that gave the family independence. Apparently, they were very rich people who controlled many things. And poor people didn't have a way out, but this was a way out for the family.
The conditions for rural people in southern Italy at the turn of the 20th century were terrible. There was what we can really only describe today as a feudal system, where people with noble titles owned all of the land and the wealth, and everybody else worked that land. They usually lived in their villages and then traveled daily beyond the town to work in the fields and cultivate products that they couldn't even afford to have. I'll give you an example from my own grandmother, who grew up in Capaccio, which is very close to Castelcivita. Her father was the bookkeeper and the carriage driver for the town's noble family, the Balelli. And the Marchesa, my grandmother told me, had fruit trees in the courtyard of their palace. And so she would let my grandmother and her sisters pick all of the fruit that they wanted, and as she said, have their fill. And this was an amazing luxury. And it's so hard to imagine how in this lush region where beautiful fruit just grows wild everywhere, that so few people could afford to enjoy it, even the people that were growing it. So emigration meant completely breaking down systems of class and status that had been in place for hundreds of years. And those who stayed could really only escape poverty with a boost from relatives abroad.
Because when his grandfather, working in the United States, sent some money to Italy, they, who were poor people, with those first money sent from the United States, bought a small piece of land in which there were only 20 olive trees. So we went there to see these trees. These trees are still there, now are thousands.
Mm-hmm.
And so, since the first day, we thought we should do something to give value to this story, to give value to these olive trees. And then 10 years later, we founded the Ventiolivi. That is our olive oil company. Now, family has got 1,000 trees. And then we expanded the company. We are a network of 4 companies. We put all this production together, and now we are 5,000 olive trees.
5,000 from the 20 olive trees 100 years ago?
Yes.
To 5,000.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
The Ventiolivi website is an homage to Michele Iorio, Michael's grandfather and Michele's great-uncle, who left Castelcivita just 16 years old and never returned. His photograph is there, and his young face is a beautiful thing to contemplate. He changed the lives of not just his parents, but his descendants. And though Michele and Michael are both well-educated, well-traveled men, it was their curiosity about him, the 16-year-old who never returned home, and the love of their land that led them to this project.
He calls me like 2 or 3 times a month. We talk on the phone all the time. And I've been advising him. I'm a lawyer, so I try to give him some assistance as best I can. Not that I know anything about Italian law, but we've been selling some oil to some of my friends. But now he's expanded in Europe. He's got a big market now in Germany that he opened up. The family's connected, I think, was the big thing. when Michele told me that he speaks English, within 20 minutes, I'm a stranger there to them, really.
Yeah.
We had pasta, we had steak, we had salad, we had meatballs. It was just like amazing. I just can't express the acceptance that I had instantly. And I was a stranger just walking into their lives.
Right.
But we've been like family ever since. Since then, my aunts had visited, my nephew, my niece have come, my cousins have come. We've all visited at various times.
And do they all love it?
They all love it. I'm the only one that's been made contact with Michele. And I like him because he's very steadfast. When he says he's going to do something, he does it. And he's a perfectionist, which we fight over, because I try to tell him, you got to enjoy life. You're not going to find perfection. But he's a perfectionist, especially when it comes to food.
All Italians are.
There's a right way, and that's it. There's no other way.
So it starts in January. After the end of the harvest, we start to cut the branches. I don't know exactly what is the verb for that.
To trim.
Trim. Thank you. So trim, and then keep the land cleaned, and then following the flowers coming out and then the fruits coming out. We don't use any chemicals, but only natural form of preservation of the trees. And so we had to follow everything carefully. Then we keep in contact with other producers to find the best way to protect our crops from the climate change. Then we spread what the job we do, not only the oil we produce, but the job we do, our knowledge. And actually, I'm professor at Roma Tre University in Rome, and I teach Olio Tourism and olive oil production and olive oil. That means organizing tours and activities to spread the knowledge, high quality, good quality olive oil among tourists or people who want to know more about the food and the oil they are eating.
Olio tourism is a growing sector that seeks to put tourists in intimate contact with farmers and nature. It's similar to visiting a vineyard, to see where the grapes are grown and to enjoy a wine tasting. And if you visit a smaller, less commercial vineyard, you should also get to meet the winemakers, which is really the best part of the experience. Olive oil, like wine, is an ancient tradition and one of the defining products of Italy, and an expression of the land itself. Oil from olives grown in Tuscany, for example, will taste much different than those grown in sun-scorched Sicily. The wind, proximity to the sea, and the soil itself all create the flavors. So when you're traveling and you want the proverbial authentic experience, olive oil is one of the best ways to accomplish that. For myself, I'm only casually interested in the precise details of production, but the best part is always hearing stories of the people who live their lives in close contact with the trees and the vines, which is just so completely different from anything that I experience in my daily life. And you know what? Climate change is not a political topic among farmers. Everyone that's making olive oil or wine that I know in Italy speaks about the changes happening and the adjustments that they are making. And one thing they always mention is how they wonder what their ancestors would do. These were people who didn't have access to technology or even weather reports. And they think about what they can learn from them so that they can better anticipate what's coming.
That's important and very important in our area because the land, the soil is different. It's not a flat land where you can grow the olive trees in an intensive way. Our land is steep, and so there are like terraces, and these terraces are kept thanks to not natural, but artificial systems like stones, wall stones that were made my grandfather or my grand-grandfather. And to keep trees, we have to keep these places like they were 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So our philosophy is to find new ways or even new technological ways to keep all things. That's our philosophy. So yes, to make it better, to make it easier, but to preserve all things. In September, we visit all the fields every week.
Mm-hmm.
and we see when it is the best moment. Normally, we have 10 days, couple of weeks to harvest the olives. And then we make two oils. The first oil is with green olives. We get a very few quantity of extra virgin olive oil, but very high in polyphenols. Polyphenols are those natural substances that defend our organism from tumors, cancer, and pathologies like blood. We have to work every day to do all the harvest. We have more than one teams, 2-3 teams working in different fields, and we produce everything in 1 month.
So do you have a team of people, friends, family, enemies? You just call and you say, it's time. It's going to happen tomorrow.
Yes, it's like that. It's like that. We have to be ready. We have to be fast and careful to do this. And sometimes when possible, we organize tours and people come and see the job we do. Yes. The best moment is not dinner, but lunch.
Lunch, okay.
When we take a break and all the team is sit on the ground under the olive trees. And so that's the best moment of every day. And then the second moment is when the olive oil at night, when the olive oil comes out from the mill. And then you can smell that flavor of fresh olive coming out. And that's wonderful. It's like a green gold and coming out with this strong flavor. Believe me, I don't get accustomed. Every day when I see the olive oil coming out, that's an emotion every day. That's fantastic. You can have a high quality extra virgin. You can have low quality. We produce olive oil, but I don't produce other kind of food. And when I have to get cheese or like meat, I go visiting those companies because I want to see how they work. Even if you are not familiar, you get informed and you see, and when you get information, the closer you get to the producer, even physically, the better is to your knowledge and the quality of the oil or the food you are having.
It's just something you can really do in Italy, especially in southern Italy. And something that's extremely difficult to do in the United States, I think, is one of the unique experiences of coming to Italy.
We say that food is related to love, to your curiosity. And so you have to feed that, your love and your curiosity. We want that the oil has to bring a piece of our territory abroad, everywhere in the world, because we want to give value to the territory. The oil is the means to give value to the territory.
Let me give you some context for what Michele means when he says that the oil gives value to the territory. This expression is common in Italy, especially in places that were once or maybe are still economically poor, but where the land itself is rich. After those years of mass emigration from southern Italy and then post-war industrialization, many of these small villages were depopulated and seen by others as backward. They fell into decline. And in so many parts of the Cilento National Park, land was even being given away to anybody who wanted to do something with it. And that bank of wisdom that people had built up and passed on for centuries was discarded. But that's changing now. More and more young people like Michele are coming back or sticking around. And I know a lot of people in rural Campania in particular who are doing things like growing wheat that is not treated to the industrialized process that causes gluten intolerance. And I know natural winemakers who add nothing to the wine that's going to leave you with a headache. These people are all giving value to their territory. On the Ventiolivi website, Michele wrote that his company is built on community roots that encourages family farmers to take care of their trees again. By creating a local production chain that respects and values them, customers, producers, and investors all take part. They all share the same extra virgin olive oil that their ancestors once produced, and that is an expression of the land itself. And in return, the olive oil gives us its enormous health benefits. And these benefits have been well studied ever since Dr. Ansel Keys an American physiologist, lived here in Cilento in this part of Italy and first studied and then eventually named the Mediterranean diet.
At the same time, we spread a very high quality extra virgin olive oil.
I remember you gave me 2 bottles last year, and
Ah.
I ate. They used all of the oil. It was delicious. I was actually like trying to get as much as I could out of every single bottle.
Yes, yes.
Really good.
The oil is produced in a very clean area. As I told you, we are very far from any factory area, so in a very clean place where you can hear only the wind
Mm.
and you see the sun. But with the modern system, we go to the mill the same day. We preserve and we keep the oil in sealed vats. So the oil is very high quality olive oil. Actually, you can find the oil in the stores. We sell straight to people. Most of the oil is sold abroad in Europe and in the United States. And year by year, this is the 3rd year, and people booking the oil in advance before the harvest.
Oh wow.
So, and that's what we want. In this way, people feel very close, tied to our territory. Many of them are people who have Italian roots.
Mm.
So, and that's what they tell me, that then we taste that drop of olive oil on roasted bread, they say, that was my grandfather breakfast.
Yeah.
I feel like my grandfather in that moment. And actually, that's the best way to feel all the flavors of the oil, but at the same time, to feel close to your roots.
I think there is something very special about wine and olive oil or any sort of agricultural product.
Yeah.
As Americans, we have this strong sense of identity as Italian Americans, but we are planted in different soil. So there's something very special about being able to connect to that original soil.
Yes, I agree. And tell you more, since 2012, we meet every year, at least once a year, and we spend at least a couple of weeks together, and we spend all those days to cook together, to do all these things together, like our ancestors did before they left Italy. So yes, that's a way to live what they lived and what they could not live anymore.
And for you, when you go to visit them, you've been to visit them. What's it like to connect with these relatives that maybe you only had ideas about?
I found a lot of Italy. When I go there, they still keep the tradition to stay together, to cook the Easter bread, or just the thing to stay together, to share. And there is a lot of Italy in how they act. So I think it is not only a trip when I go there. It's like my home away from home. Sometimes we fight about some recipes.
Ah, yes.
I grew up in East Harlem, very rich Italian section when I grew up. Everybody had grandparents from Italy. Everybody had parents that were born in America. And we as kids were born in America. And I thought that when you were born, you spoke English. And then as you got older, because our parents spoke Italian and English, our grandparents only spoke Italian, the kids only spoke English. I thought that as you got older, your language changed. And that once you were old, all you could speak was Italian. It was only as I became an adult that I became more and more curious about my grandfather and my family and how somebody at 16 could leave their country and then never go back. Still can't fathom that.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tante Belle Cose. This is a new podcast, and so I really need your help to share it as widely as possible. The goal here is to share stories from Italy that can also become a part of your future travels. Do you want to meet Michele? Do you want to pick olives with him? You can. His family owns a small agriturismo, and he organizes groups to visit the olive farm all the time. I don't want you wasting your time and hard-earned money waiting in line for a sandwich that you saw on TikTok. I want you to meet Michele and the other people who are the heart and soul of this beautiful country. So please share this on social media, subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to this on, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to join the Tante Belle Cose community, subscribe via Substack. Now, every episode is free and always will be, but there's something special reserved for subscribers. Thank you so much for listening.